The UFC is back in Canada's capital city for the first time since 2016 with UFC on ESPN Plus 4. Got a lightweight bout in the main event between raging ally Iaquinta and the veteran Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Nick Baldwin alongside UFC play-by-play man Brendan Fitzgerald, who will be calling the fights this Saturday with Michael Bisping, and also alongside my colleague Shakiel Mahjouri. Brendan, I want to go to you first. This is, one of the few Canadian cards they do every year. Second most amount of Canadian fighters on this card with 11, almost record-breaking numbers. How important is it to have this amount of Canadians on a Canadian card?
It's a big sport in this country. I mean, you guys are the Canadians, so you guys know more than I do, but they fill up the venues whenever we're north of the border. So obviously to have events is something that they do consistently. I was in Moncton last year, and to get to a city like Moncton proves that Canada is an important market for the UFC. And then I think what do you do? When you go to Brazil, you put Brazilian fighters on the card. When you go to Canada, put some Canadians on there. Let's get a big crowd in there. It'll be loud. And I think the fighters are ready to put on a show. Will
it be louder than usual? And is this more anticipated than maybe last 2016's Ottawa card, just because there's more Canadians than usual?
I just think you look at the main event and people are going to show up. Two fan favorites. You got an East-West. You got a guy like Cowboy Cerrone. I mean, I was lucky to be in the building in Denver when Cowboy made that walk, and now that's like his home city. But I think he just gets that reception. I called his fight in Austin. He gets that reception everywhere. He's just that type of fighter in mixed martial arts. He has been for a long time. And Raging Al, he's a crowd pleaser too. So the main event is going to set the tone. But obviously, I think a lot of these Canadian fighters, when they have that backing, they know what they're in for, and it just brings the whole building up.
And Shaq, you've only been in Ottawa for a day or so, but if you would describe the vibe in the city, do you get the sense that fans are excited for Saturday's event?
To be candid with you, I don't know if anyone in Ottawa can be excited for anything. It's a political town, right? So most people are here on business. That being said, I have heard a lot of news. I know the arena is actually not in Ottawa, it's in Canada, just 40 minutes out. And so there's a different vibe. It's something people here aren't used to having. The Senators have not been playing phenomenally as late. So I think people are looking forward to kind of breaking out of that political rhythm a lot of them are in and doing something a little out of the box. And it just goes to show that the UFC is starting to be accepted more and more in the mainstream, that we can have that here. So if people aren't excited going in, they sure as heck will be by the time the main event rolls by.
And speaking of that main event, it's, as I said, it's Iaquinta versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Brendan, this fight is happening at 155. I would say most would argue this is the best division in the UFC, in probably the entire sport of mixed martial arts. Considering what's going on at the top, Khabib's the champ, probably fighting Poirier in September. Tony Ferguson seems to be getting back and maybe nearing a UFC return. We don't know what's going on with Conor McGregor. The lightweight division, maybe some more clarity than last year, but still a bit foggy, still stacked. How much does this fight mean to the division?
I mean, this fight means a ton. You look at Iaquinta's 4. So if he beats Cowboy Cerrone at 8, and a name like Cerrone, and if he does it impressively, then Iaquinta has a case. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but he has a case to be next in line after Poirier. Obviously, Cowboy Cerrone is rejuvenated as a dad. He's unstoppable now from what we've seen so far. And down at lightweight, what a performance in January. So if he wins now over number 4, these guys are building their cases. And it's like, yes, it's murky at the top, but we don't know what's going to happen with Conor. We know that Khabib is probably going to fight Dustin. Tony Ferguson is right there. But with how the division has gone, the cases will be strong no matter who wins this main event because of who's on the other side of them, because of where they are currently. And in Iaquinta's case, he can make a case to fight for it next, especially if it's not against Khabib, since he had that fight already. But with Cerrone, he's this fight, maybe one more fight. I mean, things are clearing up at 155, I think, with each big fight, and certainly this is as big of a fight as we can have.
Can I chime in on that? I'm just wondering to get your thoughts on this. Do you think this fight is a net positive for Al? Because you could argue he should be getting someone a little higher in the rankings coming off of Kevin Lee in that short notice Khabib fight. But Donald has about as much name value as anyone in this promotion. Would you say this fight is a net positive for him?
Absolutely. I mean, Cerrone, as you said, he's just a big enough name. And if you're going to win in the lightweight division in the top 10, give me the easy guy, right? I mean, is it going to be Gaethje? Is it going to be, Kevin Lee's still up there. He's obviously fighting at 170. But, past the top, which is kind of settled right now, is Khabib, Dustin. Who knows with Conor and Tony Ferguson, like you say. It's like who else are you going to fight? So you can't always fight up. And if you can't fight up, then Cowboy Cerrone as your guy. I mean, it's an exclamation point for Iaquinta if he can get this win, no matter what.
Shaq, Cowboy Cerrone told us today at Media Day that retirement is a foreign word to him. He's not thinking about that whatsoever, and I don't know if he ever will, really. That said, does he have it? Does he have it in him to make one more legit run in this division at 155 and to that title?
We talk a lot about this on our Pull No Punches podcast post show. Shameless plug. I have stopped trying to make predictions on who can and can't make a title run. We've seen Andrei Arlovski come back from what seemed like a career-ending stretch, make an incredible UFC run, and then hit another big snag. I'm not about to count anyone out, especially not Donald Cowboy Cerrone. If anyone can get it done, it's him. But you can understand why Al is the favorite going into this fight.
Both on winning streaks, who do you think gets it done on Saturday?
Like I said, I'm not a betting man. I tried that, not very good at it. I think resumes and trajectory should suggest Al is the safer choice here. He's coming off of that big win against Kevin Lee, a top-ranked guy. All credit to Alex Hernandez, tough kid, but relatively untested in the top. Mike Perry has also shown to struggle once you hit that top 15. So looking off of recent fights, Al's faced and performed better against higher-level opposition.
In the co-main event of UFC Ottawa, we got Derek Brunson taking on Elias Teodoro in the middleweight division. Brendan, it's an important fight because Derek Brunson coming in here on a 2-fight skid, Elias on a bit of a winning streak. Very important for Derek to get it done, but easier said than done to get past the Spartan.
Yeah, Elias Teodoro, it's like all he does is win. He doesn't have any signature moments yet, really. I think he's still looking for that, and he has the opportunity to get that, but he's 16-2. I mean, and getting it done against a guy like Eric Anders, I think that proves a lot, which was his last time out in Toronto. This is why this sport is so great, because Derek Brunson, he's got to win. And Elias Teodoro, this is his biggest opportunity. So what's going to happen on Saturday? Right. That's the biggest question. That's the most fun part about the sport.
Undeniably, Derek even admitted it. There is pressure on him going in, maybe even in relation to his job with the UFC.
Yeah.
Does that affect him?
I don't know. I mean, he'll say it won't. Who knows what's happening between his ears? But he made a switch in camps. He's obviously feeling something. He went down to Florida. He spent time away from his family. He says, I didn't spend 5 weeks away from my family to come up and lose to Elias Teodoro. And when Derek Brunson gets it done, it's usually in impressive fashion. So we'll see if he can put it together on Saturday.
And Shaq, this is, again, Elias's biggest fight of his life, biggest test. It's going to be a tough one for both guys. Does Elias, similar question to the Cerrone, but does Elias have what it takes to be a legitimate contender at middleweight?
Man, like Brendan said, what is it, 18-2 now? 16-2? You can't make that stuff up. That is legit. And it's funny, you mentioned those statistics, and I'm thinking to myself, has there ever been a top-tier fighter with a record like that has been so kind of like, the audience reaction has always been a little meh on him. So I'm excited to see him potentially break through into that upper echelon. And I'll admit I'm a huge Elias Marc. Say what you want about him inside the cage, but outside he is just a bundle of entertainment. I think the first time I ever saw Elias Teodoro in any capacity was on Dragon's Den. He was like a male model for this martinis on wheels business. It's fascinating. You should go check it out. Why can't Elias get it done? It's hard when I look at his recent fights. Eric Anders, who I have a lot of respect for, a lot of skill, but Eric Anders has been struggling as of late, and I don't know what that says about Elias's win. But at this moment, I believe Elias can beat anyone and everyone but the most well-rounded athletes in the middleweight division. And Derek Brunson does have some areas where he struggles, so I'm really not sure, but I wouldn't look past Elias.
And Derek told us today at Media Day that training in Florida with Henry Hooft at Hard Knocks 365 really has tightened up some of the holes in his striking game. Elias, though, seems to be, at the best he's been. Who's the pick here?
Tough. It's funny. I was telling Elias how it seems like his opponents underestimate him a lot, but I'm getting the vibe that in some ways he's underestimating Derek in this one. So I'm looking forward to how that plays out. Man, it's tough. Just based on momentum, I'll go with Elias, but it's really anyone's fight.
Sure. In another feature main card bout at featherweight, we got the veteran Cub Swanson, who has done just about everything in the UFC except for fight for the title. He's taken on rising star and Shane Hurricane Burgos. Brendan, this is a big one for 145, and kind of like the Derek Brunson Elias Teodoro fight, a big fight for Cub Swanson, very important one. He's on a 3-fight skid, although has lost to the best of the best. For Shane Burgos, he's going in here, huge opportunity, biggest fight of his life without a doubt, not tons to lose. What do you sort of make of that, and who goes in there with the pressure? Does Burgos has anything to lose here?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you talk to each of the guys, and they're calm, cool, and collected as they are. Cub knows what's happened in his last 3 fights, but that doesn't have anything to do with this fight. And like you said, and like he told me this week, Brian Ortega, Renato Moicano, this guy has fought the best of the best, the absolute top-level competition at 145. Frankie Edgar was the other one. So he's ready to introduce Shane Burgos to that level, and he doesn't think Shane Burgos is up to that level. Now with Shane, what I like about him is that he's a Bronx kid, and he's going to get in your face. He's going to stand about this close, and Cub's going to swing, and he's going to swing right back. And we saw it against Kurt Holloway, which he won, but he got dropped. We saw it against Calvin Kattar in Boston. That was an awesome fight. So Shane Burgos has become the type of fighter that it's like, sign me up if he's fighting. No matter win or lose, he's been amazing to watch. And Cub Swanson, as kind of an icon in the sport for so long, we know that he's no stranger to that as well. So I think that, fight of the night, favorite maybe in this one.
I was going to ask you about that. When this fight was announced, I immediately thought back to UFC 206, December 2016 in Toronto, Ontario. Cub Swanson's fight of the year win over Doo Ho Choi, one of the best fights I've ever seen. When you heard about this fight against Burgos, similar thoughts?
I just like calling Cub fights because it gives you the excuse to go back and watch that fight like on repeat 100 times. I think it has the potential for that. Obviously, chins have to hold up in that scenario. And Cub, too, is older and wiser now. So I don't know if he's as ready to just throw caution to the wind and slug it out. Shane Burgos, I think, is. So it'll depend on whose game plan kind of wins out and what they want to do in this fight.
And Shaq, do you feel like Cub's better days are behind him? But on the flip side of that, is this possibly too much too soon for Hurricane Shane?
I'd say more the latter than the former. Losing to Renato Moicano, Brian Ortega, Frankie Edgar says nothing about you as a quality fighter. Those are some of the best names in the division. Plus, Cub Swanson's been around the block, man. He's seen the highs and the lows of the sport. There's very little that's going to faze that guy. I do see the Shane Burgos fight as a bit of a demotion, and that says nothing about Shane's skills. It's just a matter of Cub has lost to very high-level competition, and I would expect to see him against proven talent. Maybe this is what Cub needs to sort of get back on the horse. For Shane, it's a really big opportunity. I just know that it was not cheap to get me to Ottawa, and this fight made it worth it.
For sure. Also on the main card, we have Canadian standout prospects Brad Katonah and the newcomer Marc-Andre Barriault. Katonah, of course, at bantamweight, Marc-Andre Barriault, a middleweight, coming over from the Canadian Western scene, and TKO respectively. Brendan, I know you don't make picks or anything, but how do you think they fare in these high-profile fights against Merab Dvalishvili and Andrew Sanchez, respectively?
Katonah Dvalishvili is a great piece of matchmaking. I think that's a really interesting fight. It's two prospects that are really, really strong. With Brad Katonah, he might be the next big Canadian star, and he knows that. And I think that he has the mindset to deal with that. And he's just a really thoughtful guy who talks a lot about his problem solving and how being in a fight, there's a lot of problem solving that goes along. So I'm really interested to see where he goes and what he does against a guy who's as aggressive as Merab is, and a guy who trains with other people, like Merab does in New York. And for Marc-Andre Barriault, I'll just say this. I think a lot is unknown about him for UFC fans, but I think it's very strategic that he is opening the main card. When you pay attention to where these fighters are fighting, he's starting off the main card against a proven guy and an Ultimate Fighter winner in Andrew Sanchez. So they want to see what this guy has early, and they don't want to try to feed him a win or kind of bury him on the card. They say, let's put him in a big spot. We know his pedigree. He's really good. Now let's see what he does under the brightest lights.
Shaq, what is one fight we haven't talked about that really catches your eye? Looking down the card, there are a few sleepers on the prelims that might open some eyes and be fun.
Now, just to touch on what Brendan said, I didn't get to ask Brad Katonah this, but I really wanted to. You know, you see a lot of these prospects come into the UFC with like 10 first-round knockouts, and then they get into the sports leading promotion, and it's not that easy. If you go look at Brad's record, from the start, he's had a lot of decisions, and what that tells me is this is someone who can sustain his pace, and someone who, much like Kamaru Usman versus Tyron Woodley, can beat you decisively and consistently over 3 rounds. So for me, that is a big check mark. I know a lot of fans wouldn't see it that way, but as far as I'm concerned, I mean, Brad has proven that he can handle the pace. Everything else, if it's not up to par, I think will catch up. I think that's one of the hardest things to teach to a fighter. In terms of what else on this card, I've got a real soft spot to Sarah Morris, 100% bias. She's had a rough couple of fights in the UFC lately. But I actually did a documentary on her way back when I was in broadcast journalism school. She's got these cheesecake parties she hosts after every win, so I'm looking forward to maybe actually attending this cheesecake party.
Alrighty. Well, it's UFC Ottawa. It goes down this Saturday night at the Canadian Tire Centre here in the capital of Canada. Thank you all for watching. We appreciate it. For Brendan, for Shaq, I'm Nick. Keep it locked to SevereMMA and Fansided for all your UFC Ottawa coverage.